Solve the darn puzzle!
Bizarre outbursts.
Ungrateful players, I've had it!
Seriously snarky comebacks.
That may have been the most pointless story ever told.
And confrontations with the contestants that even turned outright physical.
Passing the bacon?
No.
He was rude. He put his hands on the contestants. I mean, Pat wanted to escape.
Well, I've been carrying the show for many years, so I think I know.
Face it, this was not the cool, unflappable host we all met 41 years ago. God, has it been that long? So many of you know, in June 2023, Pat announced he would retire at the end of season 41. Apparently, he didn't want to die on the wheel or something. Fans were not buying that. I mean, was Pat trying to get fired?
I have just one thing to say to you.
Did he force the big executive's hand? Rumors were brought to light. His private relationship with Vanna. Uh-oh. Network pressures of big money. I mean, how much per episode? I'm talking a billionaire host. And what about his wives, his children, and his ongoing health? We can pinpoint the exact moment when things began to fly off the rails, and it has to do with his daughter, Maggie. An insider dished, quote, "He's really feeling the stress from all angles right now, and the word is that he's wondering if it's worth sticking around." He's not a quitter by any means. Yikes, this may be our most puzzling video yet, so you're not gonna wanna miss this. And make sure you watch till the end because we cover a pretty treasonous act. Did Pat really cut off a president's address to the troops? You need to buy a vowel for yes. Welcome, I am Nostalgic Nick with DYR. We only cover the best of music, movies, and TV from our favorite decades. So thank you for tuning in. I mean, we spend well over 50 hours on research, editing, and voicing each and every video to make sure we get it right. You know, unlike those others who rely on the fake voices and computer-generated information. So please join the community, hit the thumbs up icon. It actually helps the channel more than you know. And the bigger the channel gets, the better we can keep the good stuff coming. So, alright, let's spin that wheel. Years of dumb answers. Blame the contestant. So maybe it's not all Pat's fault. I mean, did the contestants get dumber over the years? Well, a recent Forbes article seems to say so. I mean, how else could you explain an answer like this?
A group of pill pushers?
Good night, everyone! Thank you!
Yeah, I mean, I'd end the show too. It's gotten so bad that in recent years, I just wonder if the contestants are trying to go viral, especially dealing with some very not safe for work answers.
Right in the butt?
What? Come on, guys, this is a family show. Or what about repeating the same wrong answer? I mean, that's pretty annoying.
The pointed desert.
No, you still have time.
I like to solve.
Say it.
The pointed
It's
desert.
not the pointed desert. No matter how many times you say it.
I mean, this guy can't even read. Like, what?
We'd like to solve the puzzle. Superman and Spider-Woman.
No.
Spider-Woman, Spider-Woman. Now, this next guy needs to get his mind out of the gutter.
600.
K.
And although you got the right answer, I'd rather see Kevin's play.
What about when all you have to do is read the dang answer?
Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa.
No.
Okay, but is that fair? Just because he didn't know who Kelly Ripa was? I mean, Kelly Ripa. No, seriously, tell us down below, is that fair? You got contestants coming on to Pat.
The possibility.
Thinking of doing something else with the leak, and I didn't think that was it.
No.
So.
I get it, the man had to dodge so many awkward moments. But although frustrating at times and adding to his mounting frustrations, we think there is something deeper to unpack here. Maybe a certain personal behind-the-scenes incident that triggered his dissent.
This is Wheel of Fortune, Joe!
Okay, let's dig into that. Marriages and the age gap. So old Patty Sajak has been in the game since 1981. after the original host, Chuck Woolery, left over a contract dispute. And from the start, Sajak's biggest asset, I think, was his charisma. He was an affable game show host who had previously been a weatherman with Los Angeles KNBC.
As Paul put it so well, is when will it end?
And along with that chance of rain, he made such a good impression to win the attention of Wheel creator Merv Griffin.
Feel free to call on Van and me.
All right.
Any problems, we'll be there.
The forecast predicted 40 years of hosting Wheel. So, what about that work-life balance? Sajak came into hosting Wheel already married to Cheryl Sajak, but details got very murky very quickly. And wouldn't you know it, so did their relationship. So the general story is the two met while they were both in Nashville, Tennessee. They hit it off very quickly, and they tied the knot less than a year later. But just 5 years into his hosting gig, Sajak was once again a bachelor. I mean, maybe that can explain this Vanna White kiss. Or maybe the kiss explains the split. I mean, the two have such history. Pat joined the show in 1981, and Vanna was added in 82. So it's certainly possible. I mean, Pat once joked that his place of relaxation was creeping unnoticed in Vanna's garden.
You don't know this, but it's actually your garden.
So, I think that could mean a whole slew of things. Yep. Anyway, the marriage was rocky. Cheryl signed up to marry a weatherman who eventually picked up a few small hosting gigs. But Sajak's time on Wheel became the version we all know today, and suddenly, her husband was a household name. We know so little about Cheryl, and it's a quick life lesson. Fame and privacy are really hard to balance. Was it a question of Pat being too busy? Well, probably not, because enter wife number 2, Leslie Brown, who he married in 1989. They met through mutual friends and were first friends too. In fact, in one glowing review of their chemistry, Pat told People magazine, quote, "There was no electricity in the air." Okay, sure, great, boast about that. But Brown was right on the same page as she said, quote, "He was fun and easy to talk to, but it wasn't romantic." And then Leslie hit another game show, The Dating Game, and she headed off to Mexico with the winner. Pat saw what he was missing. Maybe he watched The Dating Game, and there was tons of electricity that he didn't want to miss out on. It was a pretty big headline. Famous game show host gets married. But there was something else that had people buzzing. At the time this whole courtship started, Sajak was 42 years old. And, well, Brown was 23. The age gap was more than 20 years. But Leslie's own father apparently had no objections. Although he couldn't help but make a few jabs at the age gap, saying, quote, "I gave him a little car for Christmas, and next year I'm going to give him an electric train." Sure, treat the old man like a child. And if Pat's not interested, I'll certainly take that electric train. Hey, leave me alone. I got one for Christmas every single year. But later on, we'll see that Sajak would use his famously vicious snark on himself about his own age.
I feel so free.
And tying into the whole retirement thing, just how aging changes the way a person can tolerate workplace nonsense. The curious case of Pat's children. First up, Maggie. Sajak and Leslie first welcomed son Patrick in 1990, and just a few years ago, Pat became Dr. Pat. As for daughter Maggie, born in 1995, she followed a bit more closely in Dad's footsteps.
You haven't met Pat's daughter yet. Here's Maggie.
Maggie started off all about music, sharing her first single with the world called First Kiss. Papa Sajak even included the music video in a 2012 episode of Wheel of Fortune. It was a pretty great birthday present for Maggie. She was 17. And that was the first of a few significant appearances that Maggie would make on the show. Just cause Maggie's not a doctor doesn't mean she's not bright. She's a student at Princeton. And she's also really beautiful. She landed a photo shoot with Teen Vogue. The Sajak administration believes in kids getting to attend Wheel of Fortune. And he said as much when a contestant said that his son couldn't be there because of school. Yep, we're entering Pat snarky mode when he said, quote, "What kind of father are you, Matt?" God, I love some snarky Pat. And he led by example. Pat had Maggie working on Wheel of Fortune in some way or another since 2021. Her role is kind of social media correspondent. So I guess that's what I do. I'm not sure. What do I do? Anyway, she's grown so close to the show that many fans assumed she would maybe be the next host. But those rumors were shut right down after the great Ryan Seacrest was crowned the new host instead of Maggie. Thankfully, her involvement has not gone down. She's made it no secret she thinks Pat works, in her words, a non-traditional job with a non-traditional schedule. And we already saw that fame probably cost him one relationship. But did his personal relationships cost him his job? So here's where the intrigue really starts up. Back in 2019, Sajak became way too familiar with very scary health issues. One November Thursday, the show had to cancel the taping. Sajak was nowhere to be found in the studio. Instead, he was hospitalized and undergoing emergency surgery. The cause was blocked intestines. Sajak felt so horrible, he actually thought it was his time to clock out for good.
It was tough on the Leslie, my wife, and our daughter was with me. And
He would call the pain excruciating, and all he could do was writhe around. Sajak said, quote, "I was in the fetal position, lying on the bed. They tried to give you various drugs for the pain, and none was working. Finally, one drug got Sajak so far out of it, he couldn't feel the pain. Instead, all he saw was pastel colors and faces swirling around. Oh yeah, I had one of those experiences in college. Maggie and Leslie were nearby, and he could just barely hear them through the painkillers. He thought to himself, I think this must be death. But he also said when he thought that, his only concern was that his wife and daughter would have to deal with the aftermath. After the painkillers wore off, Pat still had to recover, so Wheel underwent a game of musical jobs, where Vanna White served as host and Maggie filled in as the letter turner. Starting off on his return to hosting, Sajak was all positive feedback, ready for the future. He said things like, I still have my wits about me. They didn't remove that, so I'll be selling vowels for a long time. But if we had to define long time, it was 4 more years. But it seemed like the contestants would test those wits in a way that the near-death surgery could not. Is Pat Sajak a billionaire? It was the summer of 23 when Sajak made that big announcement. The 41st season of Wheel would be his final. But was it the most difficult decision of his life? Not quite. In fact, during an interview with Maggie after that big announcement, Sajak said he was, quote, surprisingly okay with this huge career move. He added, quote, I've had time to sort of get used to it, and it's been a little bit wistful and all that, but I'm enjoying it and taking it all in and reflecting on a great run. It's not exactly that difficult goodbye we expected from the longest-serving game show host, especially from the guy who joked about feeling nervous Vanna was getting mighty comfortable in the host's position in his absence. Or the guy who dragged Maggie into a Wheel of Fortune event when she was just 1.
She's speaking baby. You can't quite understand it.
And not to mention the pretty penny he was giving up. The numbers do vary a bit because, hey, it's the internet. But Pat's net worth is estimated to be between $65 and $75 million. There's also the flexibility aspect of it, for however the first marriage got fumbled, Sajak was clearly on the ball for his second one. In fact, Wheel ended up giving him that work-life balance that we all kind of chase. Pat once told Maggie, quote, "I like to say that I've had 40 years of a part-time job, pretending it was full-time. I could watch you guys grow up and go to the games and all that kind of stuff that work might have taken me away from." But many viewers quickly tuned into a much different attitude when Sajak had to work with contestants after that big health scare. You know, after Maggie and Vanna filled in. It's all over. Pat Sajak's escape from Wheel of Fortune. Sajak is famous for his sharp comebacks and dry humor he maintained for 40 plus years in the same gig. But in these more recent years, he's become famous not just as the face of Wheel, but for some truly stone-cold comebacks. Not to mention manhandling the contestants.
It's always my fault.
I think the most infamous and unfortunate was when he mimicked a contestant's lisp.
So that's just a myth. Yeah, it is. It is. I see.
At another point, Pat was promoting a sponsor and a contestant's excitement interrupted the plug. He said,
And thou, please?
Never interrupted.
Sorry.
Never interrupted.
"Yes, Dad, I'm sorry, Dad." He's not the most sympathetic to hopeful players. Like one time a contestant guessed wrong and he delivered a harsh,
Oh, you were so not close.
Another time, a fan favorite, Christian Dixie, grabbed Pat's envelope for the bonus round. Again, Sajak laid down the law with a resounding, "Don't ever do it again." "Yes, Dad, sorry, Dad." Then there's the good old Fred, who Sajak outright tackled and then got him into a chokehold. You do not want to get a letter wrong when Pat's on the loose. So here's the thing, we know Sajak eventually figured out the work-life balance, and that the show made it easy to have that. So missing his family didn't drive him away, at least not for a while. It was until that health scare, when he was convinced he was dying. He thought about his family. He thought about his family grieving him. So I think stuff like that, a near-death experience, it puts things into perspective. He tried to go back and keep up the Wheel of Fortune facade, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. So what do all the most infamous Sajak moments have in common? A good 90% were after that 2019 health scare. Suddenly, Sajak had fewer qualms with coming out swinging and stomping right over that line you don't usually cross. Supposedly, even the higher-ups raised their eyebrows, and Sajak wasn't left to just fling comments around. An alleged insider once told OK, quote, "Pat has put his foot in it one too many times and offended people with his off-color humor and temperamental behavior. Network brass and top-level producers have come down hard on him and read him the Riot Act." It's worth noting that reps for Wheel and Sajak didn't respond to requests for comments about this. So that timeline helps explain the grouchiness and extra snark with the players. So was it the contestants that drove him away? Here we do have some testimony from Mr. Sajak himself. He once admitted flat out, quote, "My goal was not to do the job until I keel over on it." So here's the thing. Pat Sajak does not want to overstay his welcome. He said, quote, "I believed I should leave a couple years too early than a couple years too late." That's pretty wise. So it's not a question of willingness or ability or time management. He knows that what goes up eventually comes down, unless you end it on a high note. So put him in headlocks. Cross that line, Pat, because I don't want to imagine what Pat Sajak jumping that shark would look like. Never mind, I do want to see that. Pat jumped the shark. He even admitted, quote, "Could I still do it? Yeah, I think I could for a while." Yet we've already had some of our very emotional goodbyes. First on the eve of his grand departure, and of course the very last episode, an end of an era. And if you weren't watching, there were tons of tearjerkers in that final week. We'd be remiss to not mention his longtime partner Vanna, who made sure there wasn't a dry eye for anyone, while casually throwing out the statistic of 8,000 episodes. That's at least 8,000 workdays together. and no matter how combative he was feeling with the contestants, Pat Sajak left a positive impression on the most important part of Wheel, Vanna White. Vanna competed with 200 applicants to join Wheel. And get this, at first, Pat did not think Vanna was the one, and neither did she. She admits she was a nervous wreck. He fully believed Merv was never going to hire her. But Griffin pulled a fast one, and Sajak was all too happy he was wrong. Pat said, quote, "Merv is smarter than I am, and he saw something in her and knew that the nerves would go away. And they did, and she's been a joy. And you know, I shudder to think how life could have been different." Vanna's nerves went right to the first day of filming.
And now we will officially welcome her. Please do that for Vanna White. Vanna!
It's a day she remembers clearly even decades later. She recalls, quote, "I remember being extremely nervous. It was hard for me to even talk. My mouth was just shaking out of nerves because I can't believe this is happening. I'm on a TV show." So who helped with the nerves? Well, yeah, you guessed it. Vanna said, quote, "Pat," he said, "calm down. It's going to be okay. I was just a little old girl from North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, wanting to be on TV from the time I was 10. He made me feel so comfortable in front of a camera. He was my teacher." And 4 decades later, she still remembers exactly how Sajak got her feeling calm on national TV. And you can feel that love in her goodbye. Her whole speech is a pretty great tribute to what their works come to mean for everyone. But my favorite part is, quote,
What an incredible and unforgettable journey we've had. And I've enjoyed every minute of it with you.
It definitely says something that Vanna was prepared to retire when he did. But she did have a change of heart, and she is going to ride this ride just a bit longer. And don't worry, we're not totally losing Pat Sajak from the Wheel of Fortune family. In fact, he has agreed to stay on as a consultant for 3 entire years. So why not just stay on as host? Well, again, he does not want to stay past his welcome. He said, quote, "Well, it happened again this morning. I stepped out of the shower and caught my wife dressing me with her eyes." That's pretty good, Pat. He explains, "I'd like to leave before people tune in and look at me and say, 'Ooh, what happened to him?' And it also frees up his schedule for some new endeavors. And I think he should have his pick of the crop of new jobs to take on. Although there was one pretty big treasonous mishap that'll have the employers raising their eyebrows. It's an age-old question. Can you explain this on your resume?" Okay, so way back in his career, Sajak was a disc jockey in Saigon, shouting those famous 3 words. "Good morning, Vietnam!" He said it was really rewarding work, especially when the soldiers came into town and thanked Pat and his crew for bringing just a bit of home to the war zone. But he also took a bit of it away accidentally. While Pat was disc jockeying, President Nixon, who's not a crook, prepared his very first holiday address to the entire nation, with a very special shout out, of course, to those serving overseas. So Sajak figured out the time differences, got a headset to listen for just the right cue to stop playing his usual stuff, and switch over to Nixon. So Nixon says his thing, and breaks to shuffle his papers a bit. And with all that presidential business wrapped up, Pat Sajak switched back over to the usual programming. Only one tiny issue. President Nixon had not finished at all. And while Sajak went back to his usual programming, in his other headphones he heard Nixon continue his speech. Unfortunately, now speaking directly to those troops who couldn't actually hear. Nixon said, quote, "And now I'd like to speak directly to the men and women serving our country in Vietnam." Sajak was at a crossroads, explain the mistake and jump back to the president's speech, or continue like nothing happened. In his rundown of the mistake on the USO's official website, Sajak admitted that the idea of continuing like nothing happened was just too tempting. And he did a ton of mental gymnastics to make that choice the one that helped him sleep at night. Or, as he summed it up, quote, "The devil made me do it. Maybe it was also that little devil on his shoulder causing him to fight with all those contestants. This was kind of a bombshell of a confession, because Pat Sajak was pretty much the filter between Nixon and the troops. Or as Pat said it, quote, "I was literally the only human being in the world who realized that the people the president thought he was speaking to couldn't actually hear him." Yikes, what a blunder. Sajak's got one more nefarious plot coming up, but this one won't be a national incident. He retired from Wheel, but definitely not from working, and already has his next gig lined up. He's heading over to Honolulu to perform in a community production of Prescription Murder. In it, he's playing none other than a scheming psychiatrist who's planning a murder. Just a word of advice, watch out for that headlock. Vanna White once called herself and Pat the Barbie and Ken of Wheel of Fortune, the inseparable duo she never wanted to dream of splitting up. Fans of the game show will know just how deeply rooted Sajak is in the show's DNA. But as he himself puts it, quote, "In most television shows by this time, you would have said that's probably enough, but this show will not die." However, it might be a bit less combative now that Sajak isn't dealing with contestants feeling the pressure of a live game show.
So what do you clean up this mess here?
I know.
As much as we've tracked Vanna's glamorous outfits, we also track that big change in Pat, which was caused by personal turmoil, as well as hopes for a change in that everyday grind. I mean, who could say no to Honolulu, you know? So what do you think of Sajak's snarky commentary? Did he ever go too far, or were you a fan of when he was a bit spicy? Please get down below and share your fondest memories of Pat Sajak on Wheel. And will you keep watching with Ryan Seacrest? We love to read your thoughts. After all, we're nothing without you. If you enjoyed the video, which we sure hope you did, please hit that thumbs up icon to show your support. And hey, a little subscribe couldn't hurt too. But most importantly, from all of us here at Do You Remember?
That's it. Thank you all so very much, and goodbye.